Hi everyone, and welcome to today's Kitchen Session live lecture on listening to children, how they think and learn. The session today is going to be given by Dr. Michael Bird. He's our Head of Department for Initial Teacher Training at the University of Chester. My name's Anna and I'm an HE advisor here at the university, so I'll be here along with my colleagues at the end to go through any questions that you might want to ask as Mike talks. So just to explain how it's going to work, Mike's going to begin his presentation shortly. While you're listening to the presentation, if you've got any questions, you can use the chat function that you'll see on the right hand side of your screen. You don't have to have your audio or video on, and you can appear anonymously if you wish. We'll keep all the questions for the end of Mike's talk, and then we'll read them out to Mike once he's finished. You can also like any other questions that people are asking if you particularly want to get the answer to that one too. So I think that's all we need to say, and hopefully Mike's ready. So I'll hand you over to Mike now.
Thank you very much, Anna, and good afternoon, everybody. I'm very happy to be here, and I'm very happy to share some interesting insights that I have from some of the things that I'm interested in from my own research and study. So I've chosen this title, I suppose, for this talk, and I anticipate to talk mainly for about 15 minutes or so, 15 to 20 minutes, no more than that, just so that there will be a bit of time before the half hour is up for me to deal with any questions that you might want to put into the chat. Okay, first of all, what do I do? As Anna pointed out, I'm the head of initial teacher education here at the University of Chester. So that basically means that I am in charge of, I supervise all of the programs on our in our university that leads to qualified teacher status. And a lot of them come with credits at level 6, credits at level 7, and so on. I, as a sort of scholar myself, I'm very, very interested in history, and I came myself from a background of school teaching in history, and I have, certainly developed my understanding of history as a discipline and as a school subject in the meantime. I'm also very interested in studying group behaviour. The sort of posh term for that is a cognitive anthropology. And I'm particularly interested in how groups behave when they are in institutional settings and why that behaviours can change and alter depending on the institution that they're in. And this, I think, is particularly relevant to what I'm going to share with you today, because one of the instances of group behaviour that I'm particularly interested in is dialogue. How do the people who are a member of a particular institution or organisation, how do they dialogue, and how is that dialogue affected, I suppose, by, well, all kinds of things: status of the individuals involved, the expectations on the individuals that are involved, the identities of the individuals involved, all kinds of things. So what I do, and this is one of my central research interests, is that I capture and analyse dialogue between people. Now, as far as that relates to schools, that means that I capture and analyse dialogue between pupils and between teachers and pupils. So what I want to share with you is something I've been working on over the last few years or so. And I'm not going to tell you anything about it, actually. In fact, I'm going to ask you the question. And unfortunately, you won't have an opportunity to respond, so I'm going to ask it rhetorically. What do you think these children are doing? And this is an excerpt of dialogue from a Year 8 class. And the children are all anonymised, by the way, and this data was captured, I think, about 5 years ago. And the school is a sort of standard comprehensive school in the northwest of England. Let me just set the scene a little bit so you understand what's happening. The recording devices that captured this dialogue were set up to focus on a group of, I think, 5 or 6 individual students or pupils, Year 8 pupils, who were working together on something, but I'm not going to tell you any more than that. This was an instant of the dialogue that they had. And I will also tell you this one other fact before I share it with you, that this is a very, very representative instant of the whole of the dialogue that those pupils were having with each other. Okay, so let's have a look at it's 2 slides on this, so let's have a look at the first one. Okay, what do you think these children are doing? Mark, no, but I've got to read this first. Trevor, Marky, are we starting from the beginning, or are we Samuel blurting in? I've got an idea. When we go to the flashback of the first time Stacey ever takes drugs, we can concentrate on the mate's house. And then he went off the rails. Mark, let's go from the beginning. Samuel, I need Lucy. Karen, Emma, you were that person, but where do I go? And what do I do with the cigarette? Put it in the bin. That would start a fire. When Samuel goes past, he can just hide his face, or he could just walk past like that, demonstrating. That's what I mean. Hey, kid lad. Come on, Trevor. Oh, we've got a test. Come on. We could come back with AK-47s. Wait, is that it? Don't know. But on the way home, you could see him and it would be like, come on, let's do something. I'll start here then. Okay. That's probably enough, really, to be going along with. What on earth are these children doing? Well, I think it's probably fair enough before I tell you what these children were actually doing, and some of you I'm sure may well have guessed. But I think it's probably safe to say, as you read through this, that this sounds like it is pandemonium, or this sounds like it is total chaos. How on earth are these children coordinating with each other to get anything done? This looks completely incoherent. And it's interesting because I sometimes use this excerpt with some of our own trainees. And when I share it with them, it's very interesting because I observe their teacher instincts kicking in and suggesting that they should intervene in order to put some order into what these children are actually doing. I'll tell you what they were doing. They were actually trying to put together a role play in a drama lesson. Now the role play, and this was one of the specifications that the teacher shared with the class, had to have something to do with a young child who was introduced into a new community and didn't have any friends, and that there were various temptations and difficulties in integrating into that new community. That was what the role play had to centre on. But what I was absolutely fascinated by reading this transcript and trying to follow the threads of what the children were doing was, well, several things. One, how they actually managed to coordinate anything together, and 2, how they knew whether they were in role or not as they were conducting this dialogue. And this is what makes this dialogue particularly confusing, because as we read it, when we don't know anything about the particular settings, we don't know whether these children are actually speaking as pupils or whether they're speaking in the role that they're trying to produce. And that creates all sorts of confusions. Now, about 10 minutes later, these same pupils had to perform their role play in front of the whole of the rest of the class. And this is an excerpt from that role play. This was what they eventually arrived at. Okay, and again, you just need to set the scene. So you've got about 25 chairs of pupils all facing the front of the classroom, and at the front of the classroom these 5 pupils are performing their role play. Okay, and here's a little excerpt from it. Stacey, why are you crying? It's you. What do you mean? I haven't done anything. Why have you made you cry, you muppet? I didn't do anything. Dad, where's Mum gone? We've had a little argument and she's gone for a walk. Hate you. You always do that. And Stacey looks for her aunt. Get away from me. Yes, go away and don't ever come here again. Stacey out on the street again. Hey, try this, signifying some drugs. Karen, what is it? You'll like it. Stacey takes the drugs and lights up. I've really got to go. I'll see you tomorrow. Back at home, Mark playing Stacey's father. Where have you been? You were meant to be back hours ago. I was with my friends. Oh, go to bed. I'm so upset. I don't have any friends now, and all my real friends hate me, and my new friends don't like me. My old ones have trusted me, and I wish I could get back to my old life and have a childhood to remember, not one like this one. The role play carried on in the same kind of theme. Now, I was very, very struck by this, because I hope what you're seeing now is a lot more coherence. And I hope what you're seeing now in this role play performance is actually a really successful example of the children coordinating with each other what they were doing. Now, as we look at this, and as we sort of see more or less a kind of storyline, it's a contrived storyline, of course, but there's a lot of themes in there that are quite heavy and quite serious and clearly mean a lot to the children. Doesn't that put a different spin on this, on that chaos at the beginning? Okay, we go through this particular sort of preparatory sort of pandemonium, and I think it's fair to say that we can, you know, start to see a little bit of meaning in what the children are doing. And actually, it didn't need the teacher to weigh in at all. The children actually knew what they were doing. It just sounded like pandemonium. It sounded like chaos. But that was partly because the teacher's on the outside of it. Now, as the final little excerpt that I'd like to share with you, and this again, I think backs up the idea that these children were actually taking this activity extremely seriously, and that you know, rather than jump to conclusions that these were children that were disengaged or not really focusing and just messing around in the class, actually I think these children were much more engaged. And this was a final plenary reflection in which the teacher, who is the T here, invited the rest of the class to feed back some comments to the people who produced the role play. So, looking back at the criteria, who can spot two conventions used in the role play? Flashback. Yeah, flashback. Still image. When did they use still image? When Stacey was reading the thing out and you noticed what was happening in the background. Good. So we definitely have at least two conventions. And they did a monologue. Yes, they did a monologue. So they combined monologue and still image in the background. Yeah. Did they have a really clear structure? Yes. What do we mean by structure? How a piece of work is put together? Miss, they had direct address as well. That piece of work had a clear beginning, middle and end. So if I asked what the middle was, what would you say? The middle bit was when the student went for his. Does anyone else think that? Good. So we can pinpoint exactly where the beginning, middle and end. So here's another example, and here's another excerpt of the children taking this activity extremely seriously and clearly valuing what they saw the other pupils putting together. And what I thought really interesting about this was that these children actually had, you know, quite a lot of expertise in the drama that they were doing, because they were able to identify particular conventions like monologue, still image, flashback, structure, that they were evaluating the role play on. And these were sort of criteria, I think, that those pupils in that chaotic excerpt right at the beginning had in the back of their minds, because there was clearly a decision made in that earlier period for the pupils to put these conventions into what I think all in all was a very successful role play. So it's a very tantalizing taster into the work of pupils when they are working inside themselves and as a team and as a group. And it's easy, isn't it, for somebody on the outside to jump to conclusions, to think that this must be nonsensical, or that this must make no sense, or that they must be misbehaving or getting up to no good. But I think in this instance, I hope you can see actually those pupils were doing something that was very important, and something which actually unleashed a sense of their own capability. They were clearly able to perform their role play with all of these conventions and criteria underneath it. So a valuable lesson there, and I think it's a lesson also for us, really, in terms of how we can talk to each other. And the final point I want to make is that, you know, in this world that we live in, I wonder whether we forget a little bit how we're dialoguing with each other. And when I say dialogue, I mean real dialogue, when we're actually listening to each other and appreciating each other, even if we disagree. And actually, in some respects, that's what these pupils were doing, and they were doing it very, very well and very, very effectively. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope that was an interesting and a tantalizing little presentation for you, listening into children's voices. So it's an opportunity now, if there are any questions to ask.
Yeah, Mike, so we have got a couple of questions that have come in. Okay. So really, really good question, actually, something that I was thinking as you were going through those excerpts. How hard was it to capture those excerpts from the children?
Very difficult, because you probably noticed from the first excerpt that there were a number of, I'll just zoom back to it, there were a number of bracketed sections and dotted sections, which basically is shorthand to mean that these were incoherent. The recording device couldn't actually discern, because a lot of these utterances were made simultaneously. They are, as in the transcript, they are in order, but a lot of them overlapped inevitably. So it was difficult to get these to sort of collect these things together, and it took quite a long time as well to discern and decipher.
And a sort of follow-up question to that, if the children knew that they were being observed, do you think they held back at all on any of their real self, or do you think they were really authentic in what they were doing despite being observed?
Well, I mean, children are being observed all the time, and, you know, in a way, the children are very, very rarely ever left completely on their own to do something. And in school environments these days, there's always at least a teacher or a support assistant who's there, at least in a supervision capacity. So, and the other thing I suppose I would say is that, you know, the generation of school pupils and the generation of students, the generation of young adults that you know, we're unleashing onto the world at the moment are the most assessed young people ever in the history of mankind. And I suppose, in a way, assessment is a form of a sort of surveillance, isn't it? A sort of, you know, observation of how they're getting on. So I think the children are perfectly used to being observed. And I think that the presence of the recording devices in this particular setting didn't seem to make really any effect on the children's behaviour at all. I mean, obviously, I don't know that. Because I don't have a parallel group that did the same activity without the recording devices, but certainly my impression was that these are very natural settings in the classroom.
No, that's really interesting. Another question that we've had, which is also very interesting, is do a lot of these interactions depend largely on body language as communication? Yes. And whether children of this age have more or less focus on body language? So does that change as the children get older?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and I think it's crucially important as well. And it's one thing that you lose from transcripts, of course, like this. We didn't get permission to do the video recording. We only got permissions to do the audio recording. And you're right, that sort of you do lose a dimension of the communication here. And clearly the body language was absolutely critical to this. And going back to the thing that confused the teachers and the people observing this first excerpt, the thing that confused us was it wasn't clear when the children were making an utterance in role and when the children were just talking as themselves. It just wasn't clear. But I'm sure that if we'd had sort of video evidence, we would have detected some slight changes in body language that would have indicated, and clearly did indicate to the rest of the pupils in the group, that now I'm in role, or now I'm just being Emma, you know, the normal child. So I think that's a really, really good point.
No, that is a good point. And this is also, I mean, there's some really good questions coming through. As a trainee teacher, you know, what advice would you give to teachers to create a classroom environment where students feel able to express themselves and share their classroom experiences?
Yes, and I suppose there is this tension, isn't there, I think, in sort of educational settings, and I think schooling particularly has this as a challenge, because everything is quite often prescribed down to the sort of last detail, and everything is sort of predetermined to such an extent that it's difficult to sort of really see space for children to explore and to take a sort of innovative or creative approach to the subjects that they're involved in, the subjects that they're learning. But I agree, I think that means that in creative subjects like drama, for example, it's I think one reason why keeping hold of those subjects in a school curriculum is absolutely critical. It's really important. And of course, drama, and this is another problem or constraint. Drama is not actually a national curriculum subject, which means that schools are free to just simply drop drama from the curriculum altogether. And I think, that's a shame, because drama is one of those subjects in which pupils really can express themselves. But it's a challenge. How do you do that in science? How do you do that in maths? How do you do that in history? I think it can be done, and the best teachers do it, because the best teachers recognise that it's important. But you can understand, with the pressures as they are, that it's tempting to keep everything confined, to keep everything under control.
Yeah, I mean, the next question we've got might really just follow on from that. So as a teacher, perhaps in another of those settings, so not in a drama setting necessarily, how would a teacher in one of those settings encourage their students to talk to them if they were needing help? How do you build that level of trust with your students?
Yeah, absolutely. And quite often, one of the things that I absolutely love about children, I've learned this from actually studying a lot of these transcripts. I've learned that children are incredibly durable. I know that they are sort of vulnerable in all sorts of other ways, but they accept feedback when it's honest and given to them sincerely, and even if it's critical, they take it on board, and they honestly really try to act on it. They really do. And I think what complicates it sometimes for children is when feedback or when dialogue is somehow freighted, or when there's another agenda behind it. That's the thing that can confuse children sometimes. They just want to know. Children often just say to teachers, just tell me, tell me what I need to do. And so I think that's so important for teachers in terms of developing that trusting relationship, is to be honest, be tactful, diplomatic, be honest, and also accept what children tell you, because children are also honest back, sometimes brutally so, and it's important to listen. Listen very, very carefully to what they say. That's the thing that promotes trust.
I think that's really good advice, and it comes back to what we started with about that dialogue, doesn't it? So having that dialogue with the students. So that's really good advice. I can't see any more questions coming in at the moment, Mike. Maybe we'll just hang on for a minute or so. Maybe Anna could sort of wind things up a little bit, and if any questions come in the meantime, then we can come back to you on those. Would that be okay?
Absolutely fine. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Mike. Really enjoyed that, and it was a great discussion at the end as well. Yeah, just to say thank you very much to Michael Bird for delivering the talk today. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you want to get involved with our whole range of kitchen session live lectures, we've got lots of exciting topics coming up over the next couple of months. So if you haven't yet registered for any more, please do head to our website and take a look at those. I can't see any more questions coming in, so I think we'll wrap things up. Thank you very much for listening, everyone, and we hope to see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you.